So thank you. Appreciate your time. We know that webinars are one of those things that a lot of us have been doing less of, and so we definitely think this topic is relevant. And I think there's some really interesting findings, both in what we're learning from our customers and our partners, as sort of overall trends that we're seeing in IT, and some of the conversations that we're having across those areas. And then we'll kind of get into the study and go through that. I guess step one is really introductions. So my name's KJ Burke. I'm the field CTO for hybrid infrastructure at CDW Canada. And really what my role entails is I work with our customers, I work with our partners. I try to understand, technology trends. I work with industry leading, research and survey groups, and have a lot of executive conversations with, with C-level, with the organizations that we help serve. My background, I spent a lot of time on the customer side. So I spent time working for Barrett Gold, time working for OpenText. And so most of my career, I've been on the customer side, really trying to solve, for technology challenges and create innovation, inside of an organization. And it's very different than being part of a sales organization. So I definitely feel more comfortable being, talking to customers and finding out their challenges and working through that. And I'm joined by Michael Traves.
I'm Michael Traves. I'm a principal architect with CDW. Coming up on my 18th year with the organization. And my background when I started my career was always around data management, high availability, disaster recovery, and then really taking an interest in helping customers take that data and turn it into information and insight. Got into the BI space a little bit over the course of those years, and since that time I've transitioned more into the software development, DevOps space, and now AI over the last few years as we've seen it explode onto the forefront. So very excited to help customers wrangle their data and derive some insight out of it, build some architectures and infrastructure to help them address a lot of the use cases and really deliver value back to the organization and their users and customers. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things with AI is it is all about, how do we, find ways to increase productivity? How do we, take the toil out of the work? I like the term that Michael has been using, and get focused on sort of the business value that we really want to be focused in on. So to set a bit of a starting point. Why are we talking about AI? Why is it important we talk about it now? Interesting thing is, we were just at BCNet talking to education leaders in really across Canada. But when we say AI, it depends on where you're at. Are you part of IT? Are you part of the business? When we say AI, you could have been doing research for the last 20 years. And so AI is nothing new to you in the machine learning space, where Michael spent a lot of his time. But really, what's driving the conversation is generative AI. And generative AI and how it's changed accessibility to data, accessibility to some of the tools, accessibility to being able to create your own tools that leverage your data. And so the reason why we're talking about it today is because it's accessible. We don't need data scientists. We don't need a complex data pipeline. We don't need clusters and massive amounts of infrastructure to really leverage AI to increase productivity, take some of those tasks that are arduous and make those easier, or eliminate them from our day for the most part. The other thing is it's relevant. It's relevant to all of us. All of us have part of our workflow that we do individually, that we do as part of a team, that we do as part of a larger organization. We all have parts of our workflow that we could improve upon, that could be made easier, that could be automated. And we all use data. So just making data more accessible, being able to comb through mounds and mounds of data effectively will save us time. The other thing is AI is everywhere. One of the jokes and one of the games I've been playing in meetings is if the meeting isn't about AI, how long does it take for AI to come up in that meeting? So it's nice to be able to talk specifically about AI today, but yeah, it's in every conversation. We're joking. I had somebody forward me an advertisement for an AI powered driver for golf. And it's, I guess, it's there, so the marketing teams can use that, but it is literally everywhere. With generative AI, again, just to sort of level set, generative AI is really good at three things. Data summarization, being able to look at a vast amount of data and distill it down into either a concept that can be explained or a summary that can be easily consumed. But it's about taking that information and distilling it down to make it more easily accessible. It's able to generate. So we've all seen, the content that's been generated, some of it very good, some of it very bad. One of the examples I've seen is as you're testing AI, can your AI write Seinfeld episodes? And that was kind of an interesting one. If you train an AI on, thousands of hours of Seinfeld, can it actually, write a decent story? But where we've seen a lot of that is, can we use it to generate, maybe we're trying to communicate with a stakeholder that is not somebody we deal with a lot. I'm in IT, and maybe I don't have a strong, finance background, which is pretty much describes me to a T. But if I'm going to talk to my CFO, leveraging AI to say, look, this is the information. How will I explain that in a language that my CFO will understand? Those are the types of sort of business generation of content that's really driving a lot of value, saving me time because I'm going to speak their language maybe a little bit easier, and then driving towards that. And then also classification. So classification in the sense of organizing data. One of the challenges we have as we go forward is with data governance and leveraging some of the AI tools that are available to start classifying that data, so I can curate it more effectively, et cetera. So when we think about generative AI, let's think about summarization, generation, and classification. Right. So from an AI trending perspective, independent of the report, but also being influenced by the report, these are some of the major technology trends that we're talking about with customers this year. So AI transformation started with sort of for the individual. How do we help individuals optimize what they're doing? How do we get them tools? We had a lot of co-pilot conversations, things like Firefly, tools that are AI powered. But it was really, how do we help the individual person be more effective and more productive using AI tools? As the year has progressed, and I know we're only in April, or we're already in April, depending upon how you look at it, we're having a lot of conversations about retrieval augmented generation. And again, how do we provide value but limit risk? And so that conversation has been evolving over the last sort of 5-6 months. And RAG is something we'll touch on, but RAG is definitely something that's highly relevant. And then data management and governance. And so a lot of organizations want to take advantage of AI across the organization, and they've really struggled because of the data quality. Okay, somebody's having issues seeing the presentation. Yes, okay. So if you are not able to see the presentation, it probably is on your end, unfortunately. So try disconnecting and reconnecting. The Microsoft Teams fix. Okay, that's that. Okay. So data management and governance is one of those things where, again, there are tools to help you with that, but that's really become a barrier or a checkpoint and a gate that our customers have to get through in order to roll out some of these organizational AI products and tools that their executives want to see rolled out to the organization. It's also become a major limiter for tools that they want to get in front of their customers. So again, when we think about our customers and people external to our organization, we want to make sure that we don't have hallucinations, we don't have bad information, or we're not putting out intellectual property or risky data to external users. And so data management and governance has been a huge area of interest and driving a lot of conversations around AI. And then the other one here is business focused. One of the challenges that IT organizations have really struggled with over the last, 5, 6, 10 years has been being relevant to the business. And so what we've seen is from a budgetary perspective, more and more budget going to teams that are building, so development teams or project teams. We're seeing more and more of the budget directly being decided and spent by the executive team as a service. Maybe they've gone to ServiceNow or Office 365, but it's not really in IT's decision making where that spend is going. And so as IT's role has sort of diminished in some ways. It's harder for IT to get more plugged into the business, really help drive innovation in the business. And so AI really offers an opportunity for us to get re-engaged with the business, get plugged into that value stream. Maybe like one of my challenges was I worked for a mining company, and one of the biggest challenges I had is we were always overhead. We were always a G&A, and we were always a cost center. And so AI, if you're in IT and you're viewed as being a cost center, AI is an opportunity to really sort of flip that equation on its head and say, okay, we're not just a cost center. We're going to help drive business targeted value through some of these AI tools that we're going to build and we're going to provide to the business. And so focusing on the business, because the business is the one that's making the decisions fundamentally, what we're spending, how we're spending, and AI is a way that we can drill into that, right? So a couple of numbers just to sort of set the size and scope of what we're talking about. We're looking at well over 300 million AI-powered devices sold in 2024. I think that might be, and that's global numbers, but I think that might actually be underestimated a little bit because we're having a lot of conversations. The trio of Windows 11, Copilot, and AI-ready device is really driving a lot of conversations from an endpoint perspective and a smart device perspective. $100 billion times two, that is the amount of money that Microsoft and OpenAI are going to be investing $100 billion in AI infrastructure, and Google will also be investing. They've committed to investing $100 billion into AI infrastructure. So, I mean, those are massive, massive numbers. And then from a Canadian perspective, the government recently announced that, not only is there the agreements and the workings with NVIDIA and Ontario and with U of T and some of the educational institutions, but the government has also mentioned that they are going to be funding $2.4 billion into AI infrastructure in Canada. So again, we're seeing that investment, we're seeing that commitment, and we're seeing the growth of those services, right? So some of the Canadian trends, and this is one of the things that we saw coming out of the report. Not to get too far ahead, Michael's going to speak specifically to some of the findings, but there's been a disruption to sort of the normal adoption cycle of technologies. Generally we see large enterprise sort of leading the way with innovation. Then we see smaller entrepreneurial cloud first or sort of startup mentality organizations as quick followers. We see smaller enterprise move next, and then we see medium-sized enterprise. And medium-sized enterprise tends to lag because they have all the complexity of a larger organization. They just tend not to have the people to do some of the work. What's interesting with AI is it's really large enterprise and then medium-sized organizations and then smaller organizations last. And there's a couple of things. One around sentiment and the perceived value of AI being different. And then the other one is really around the difficulty, or sorry, that was the main thing. I my mind went on to something else. So it's really that there's not the perceived benefit, with smaller organizations, and so that's led to sort of a reorganizing of how that innovation is happening across different types of sizes of infrastructures. And then the confidence, our ability to deploy. I think we'll touch on that in a minute. Um, and some of the top tools that are being used there. So this is a bit of a spoiler, but we're going to get into that with the rest of this. So a little bit about the survey. So we commissioned a survey in collaboration with Angus Reid. So all of the data that we have is from Canadian-based organizations. They may have had some workers outside of Canada that reported into the survey, but it's Canadian organizations. One of the things that we're trying to do at CDW Canada is bring our customers and the Canadian landscape information about Canada. We find that most of the time when we look at reports, they are focused in North America, which means they're heavily skewed towards the US, or they're global, which means they're heavily influenced by the US and Europe. And it's hard to get information about Canada specific. So we're going to talk about some of the findings, but feel free. The report's available, available on our website. So I highly recommend that. The other thing I want to just quickly mention is we also have our security study that's going to be coming out here at the end of the month. That's the 9th annual cybersecurity study that we're doing, and that is all Canadian data. And then later in the year, we'll have our 4th annual cloud study, which is really focused again on hybrid cloud and Canadian organizations and what they're doing within hybrid cloud. Just a quick note of that. And then I'm going to hand it over to Michael Traves, and we can cover off some of the key report takeaways.
Yeah, so this is kind of the summary of a lot of the findings, and we've got some background slides after this. But this is what really kind of stood out for us, and I think the overriding is that in the majority of organizations, so 58%, irrespective of whether they're a small, medium, or large customer, or whatever industry they happen to be in, they understand, they believe that AI is going to increase productivity and efficiency for them, for their employees, and that's really key. So people are interested in this technology, they're interested in how it's going to benefit, and they believe it will benefit them. One of the other interesting areas is that IT decision makers who've actually implemented something around AI for one of their use cases, one of their applications, 52% found it to be fairly straightforward to do that. So something, as an example, adopting ChatGPT maybe as an LLM to address a specific use case, and so generative AI feeding into that. Not too hard to actually have some impact, but at the same time, the confidence level, 21%, about the ability of the organization to actually use it effectively. So there's a bit of a disconnect in between the ease of implementation for against a particular use case and the confidence level that an organization is actually going to be able to adopt this generally in a positive way. So I think that's an area where an organization like ourselves can kind of help bridge the gap. So I see that as an interesting statistic. And then 70%, I think, fairly clear when we talk about AI with our customers. It's like, how is AI being positioned? And if there's concerns around it, it really has to do around the ethical implications and how is my data being used, and how can I ensure that it's being used in an ethical and responsible way? If I'm using it to answer questions about my data, how do I ensure that data is being used appropriately, and I can trace back how I'm getting my answers, and you like to say attestation, those kinds of things. So I think there's a real concern around the ethical implications, and again, I think we can help from a data governance perspective to address some of that. And then 50% of organizations are using natural language and interaction tools. So I don't think that's too surprising that the majority of these cases over the last year or two have been around ChatGPT and similar technologies, and because quite frankly, that's where the explosion of interest has come from. That's where everyone, including my kids, are interfacing with ChatGPT on their devices, and it's it's ubiquitous. Everyone can log into a website and start hacking away at it. And so it's very open in that sense. Whereas, I don't think that well, obviously there's still a lot of interest in machine learning and deep learning platforms and building those out for larger organizations, but at an individual employee level, that it's more interactive with a tool like ChatGPT.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we think of generative AI and ChatGPT kind of in the same sense, but we're really seeing, Hugging Face and the access to large language models and making it accessible to do it on your device is really popular for that data privacy when you talk about like the ethics and the need to make sure that we're controlling our data and we're not oversharing our data. That's definitely driving a lot of conversations as well.
Yeah, I sometimes worry with some of the endpoints. My kids have a robot and somebody enabled ChatGPT for it, so they end up having conversations with it. Where's that data going? Do I really want my kids talking to that? What's the response coming back? How is data governance being applied to that? But it just goes back to the fact that we're all dealing with this, and it's very ubiquitous, and we have to get it under control. Moving on, so from Canadian organizations are cautiously optimistic about AI. I think that's been pretty clear from what I'm saying, and everyone's open to using it. It's just a question of ensuring that we got the right guardrails around the data that's driving it. So after that one metric, 58% find it's going to increase productivity and efficiency. But are we able to implement it at an organizational level in an effective way? So I think those are the really important call outs there. Again, 62% of businesses are comfortable using the tools, and 48%, so about half, are positive about using AI within the workplace. So there's a lot less fear, I think, in the workplace than we might have anticipated initially. It's becoming, and I think continues to be, more accepted that there is value and that it is going to drive a lot of use cases for organizations and really be part of our day-to-day. So I think that's really important to take away as well. Some of the challenges hindering investment in the area is just, despite I think the interest, adoption, and what we're seeing, it comes down to a lot of the concerns around and the risk we've talked to in the ethical implementation. And 93% of organizations, decision makers, have concerns about this. And the main reasons, it's about fear of jobs, displacement, ethical unknowns, and security risks. And I think when we talk about the job displacement, a lot of it I think is perception. AI, as we talked about initially, can take a lot of the toil away from our day-to-day and really make us more efficient in what we do. It's less about replacing individuals or roles or expertise, and more about making people more capable and efficient and enabling to be more creative with the tasks that they do. Same story of other technologies. Automation had the same kind of issues. And I think we've seen that be really effective for organizations who've adopted it. So that it is certainly an area of concern that we have to talk about. Ethical unknowns. How is my data being used? How is the data being trained? Is there bias in the data? How do I take a data set that might have been trained on, say, Reddit, and compare that to a data set that was trained on more business oriented language? And so how your model, which model you choose, was trained and tuned, and how bias is being addressed can really affect can really get to that point. And then ethics comes down, and security risks. We're talking about governance. What data was it trained on? What data is it making? We talked about the RAG model, the ability to provide context to the LLM. Am I ensuring that the data that it has access to is appropriate for the individual who's asking questions about it? Do I have to de-risk it before the questions get asked, or can I do that on the fly based on the access of that particular individual? So there's a lot of governance and control that we can apply to the data to, again, address a lot of these concerns, because they're perfectly reasonable. And it's just a question of how we ensure that your use of it is taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, one of the things to understand about the language models is, we're starting to see providers taking language models and fine-tune training them for more specialized use cases. And then there's also been, if you're following that space, you're seeing that people have sort of gauntlets of testing that they're putting the various language models through to measure the effectiveness of the language models in different scenarios. But there's also tools out there. I just want to call attention to Helm. Helm is the holistic evaluation for language models. It's something that Stanford in the U.S. is doing, and they actually score different language models across a number of different attributes. And so when you look at that, it's not just about the effectiveness, and it's also what is the bias, like what are the other attributes, what's the level of toxicity, and there's a lot of trade-offs that you really have to make when you're looking at some of those initial foundation models. So based upon your leadership and your board's concerns, you can start to target foundational models that are more in line with their expectations. And so I guess the key there is that it's not just about the ability of the model to get you an answer. It's about getting an answer that is really in line with the expectations of your organization, and know that it's not just the blunt answer you necessarily want. It's the nuanced answer that you're really looking for. And there's mechanisms. So if you just search Helm Stanford, you can find the holistic evaluation for language models framework they're using. And they've been pretty good about adding new language models that are made available to that, and then providing that information. So anyway, so this goes into that whole preparatory phase for AI. Know your organization, know what they're concerned about, know what their values are, and then really aligning with foundational models that are closest to those needs, right?
And so, following an investment in AI, where are organizations expecting to see benefit? We talked about the increased productivity and efficiency. I think that's pretty obvious. If any of you have had a chance to work with Copilot, it's fairly clear its capabilities, and the fact that it's going to cut a lot of that toil, as I mentioned, out of tasks. It doesn't do everything perfect. It doesn't always organize things exactly the way you want it, but also in a quick pinch, you can get something done in a couple of minutes that might have had to take you an hour. So there's definitely some efficiency and productivity to be gained there, even in its most basic form. And these days we have copilots for just about everything. There's an assistant somewhere out there from some organization that can help you with your day-to-day tasks. Increased access to information, increased data information availability. I think, again, it's like, how do you find information today from a corporate perspective? I know even myself, there's a lot of information out there buried on Teams, buried on SharePoint, buried in my email. How do I effectively find that information and present it back to me in a consumable way? And the global search just doesn't do it anymore. It hasn't done it for quite a while. So this is another opportunity to make the information that I have access to and that I should have access to available available to be consumed and presented back to the particular individual in a way that they want to consume it. And then 42% financial benefits or cost reductions. So the ability to both, I think, generate potentially more income, but also reduce the cost of delivering a service to our end users, or to your end users. So there's definitely a lot of potential there in terms of optimizing how a service is delivered, both in terms of profitability and cost reductions.
Yeah, and I think the expected benefits that's definitely an area where, as you're building out your use cases, as you're building out your business cases, and you're trying to show value. What's interesting is I was listening to James Scott at Dell talk about AI models, and we talk about, POCs, proof of concepts, and we've talked about POV, proof of value. The term he's using that I kind of like, and I wish I would have thought of it first, but he's talking about, proof of productivity. And so when we're thinking about the value of these AI tools, and we'll talk a little bit about how to kind of segment those and specifics. And obviously we're doing a lot of webinars and trying to, work with customers so they can better understand the use cases. But really thinking about those AI tools in the sense of proof of productivity, how many hours a week are you going to be able to save somebody? Maybe you're deploying a tool across 100 people, and it's going to save them each an hour a week. Well, when you start to tabulate that across weeks and weeks and months and years, there's a lot of value in that, even that 1 hour a week per person. And so, what is the proof of productivity, and how are you going to drive benefits? We had a question come in from Jonathan. I feel like we should, we can address it kind of in line here. Curious about organizations and the amount of different AI tools, AI services, and sort of that proliferation of monthly subscriptions and things like that. And if you're an individual, you know all about that, because you've got Midjourney's hitting you for $20 a month, and ChatGPT for the 4 Turbo is charging you per tokens, and so every one of these, it's almost like streaming services. Every one I want to try, I end up in some sort of a monthly subscription, right?
I'm waiting for the bundle of copilots to be made available at some point.
We need the cable, the cable streaming plan. So yeah, I think organizations are going to look at that. And Jonathan, I had a really interesting interaction with our CFO. And I was explaining sort of the cost model. We built a RAG demo, and it cost I think it cost about $80 to build. So it was about 50 megs of data, created a vector database, and just a quick chat bot to do some interrogation of that information and some generation of content from it. And so about 50 megs of data, took about, spinning it up in Azure, it cost about $80. And then the day-to-day use of it was sort of $10 to $20, depending upon how much use it had. And so, my CFO took a look at that, and he immediately went to my operational expense is $20 a day, $600 a month, $7,200 a year, whatever that comes out to be. I'm just doing math quickly, which I should probably get the AI to do. But it was he was immediately calculating, well, if we have one of these, that's $7,000 a year. And if we've got another one, that's another $7,000 a year. And so he's already like looking at the cost of that. And I said, but if the usage goes up and our costs go up because it's in the cloud and there's a consumption-based component to it, we're getting the value out of that. So the more we're spending, theoretically, the more time we're actually saving. And then it just comes back to having, KPIs and things like that. So I think if organizations are subscribing to tools like Copilot, like these various generative AI tools, and we create mechanisms to track that proof of productivity gain, then we're going to have an easy job justifying those, or we're going to be able to say, of all of our toolkit, these 5 different tools we have, this one is underperforming. Then it's really about setting some of those KPIs that we can measure. And from what I'm seeing, measuring that productivity improvement is probably the one that we want to focus in on, right? So if there's 10 things available that you can buy, should you buy all 10? Probably not. Can you do some proof of concepts, and see what is that productivity change? Yes. Is that going to change over time? Potentially. So you want to keep an eye on that. But I think organizations are willing to subscribe to the tools, or build their own tools, or even potentially build their own foundational models, if they're getting the value out of that in productivity gains.
And I think that's the key, is identify some use cases that are meaningful to your organization and that will have meaningful impact. And that gives you a place to start. It gives you a place to build out a proof of proof of concept, proof of productivity, demonstrate that there's actual value in delivering that as a service leveraging AI. And then you get buy-in from the organization to expand that out, because there's definitely value to be found in all of this. It's just taking that first step.
Yep.
And then that leads into this. I mean, organizations are literally just scratching the surface of what's available out there in the industry. There are so many tools. I read the news on my phone far too often, and I can say that there are multiple announcements every day about organizations either starting up or announcing new versions of tools, announcing investments. There's so much news in the industry around AI that it's impossible to keep up with it. Ultimately, you just need to get started, and that's certainly the one takeaway I would say. So 50% of organizations using natural language processing interaction tools. We talked about that. I think the rise of LLM and generative AI over the last couple of years, and the massive investment we're seeing from the largest institutions that are out there, and certainly the acquisitions that they're making, it's just huge and highly impactful. A lot of obviously still investment in the traditional machine learning and deep learning platforms. I think there's been a huge number of high performance computing work that we've done lately with organizations, and every single one of them, whereas traditionally they've been compute heavy, are now very much GPU heavy, and that's specifically to enable this new wave of innovation. And then the 19% around automation and optimization tools, which at this stage is really critical to being a foundation for AI. And the automation, the example of automation as it relates to this is all of these things, you know, as you're building out models and leveraging models in your environment, it's all based on data. And that as you collect more and more data, you want to better inform the model, you want to better train the model. And so the use of automation to continuously improve from a software development perspective, or CI/CD, if that's your background, continuously improve the model so that you get better results out of it when you as an end user is also critically important, and being able to automate that whole process is really critical. So
yeah, and the other thing we talk about in this sense is just scratching the surface. If you're in security or if you're in charge of compliancy and things like that, and you're looking at governance and risk within your organizations, you know, AI tools really pose probably the biggest shadow IT risk ever. And what's really interesting, or well, interesting because I'm not in security, terrifying, I guess, if I was in security, is you know, like I'm leveraging a really easy to use tool called LM Studio. You know, download a language model, a local on the machine, you know, leveraging that to do some testing. Maybe I'm trying to write an Ansible script. I can use that tool on my machine to help, you know, write the Ansible script, or at least get me 95% of the way there. You know, these tools will be available for all of your users. Right. And so again, if you don't, and the challenge is that some organizations are putting the block out there, and then their user base are just finding really easy ways to get around that block. And so you know, as you're evaluating, as you're trying to figure out how to do this, finding a way to provide governance and access is really critical, because if you don't provide the access, then a lot of times we're seeing you know, users within the organization bypassing the governance. So just I have identified that as this grows, as we start to do more than just scratch the surface, if we start to deny access, then that's a risk that we run, right?
and then one of the other things we were able to contrast as part of our data here is the difference between public and private sector adoption. And I think you know, both are positive on adoption. So that's great. They also both have different concerns. So 64% of organizations in the public sector are again positive, 58 versus private. But the concerns are different. So as we might expect, our public sector users are concerned about data breaches. It's our data they're actually managing, so we should be concerned about that too, for some data breaches, security, privacy, and data protection. We don't need any of that in the news and having our personal information and our tax receipts and all the content. And there's been examples of that over the last few years. So that's really important to the public sector, whereas a private organization is more concerned around regulations. Are they meeting the regulatory requirements in the market that they're serving? The ethical implications of how data is being used to service their customers and their end users, and ensure that the data that they maintain on their employees is being used appropriately, and then the bias and in the data and how that data can be used from a programming perspective, because a lot of our customers are doing development work, I think, and so that maps into this as well. So private concerns versus public are a little bit different, but overall, again, there's an openness to adopt and to deal with these issues. Okay. And then we talked about the difference between adoption in terms of the large, medium, and small, and the fact that large is adopting faster than medium, but medium is very kind of a close, what's it right?
Fast follower.
Fast follower,
Yeah.
where like the small businesses are a little bit more challenged in terms of how they can adopt it and how they can drive value out of it. So 37% of larger organizations reported enhanced customer experience. So they're really taking that and starting to adopt it and seeing the impact in the services and use cases that they've decided to move forward with first. Whereas I think smaller businesses are a little bit more challenged in identifying what use cases are more meaningful to their customers and how they can effectively take advantage of that. So less success from a small business perspective. And then 44% of larger businesses noted improved decision making versus, again, 20% of small businesses. So I think those are just things that we need to be be aware of. And then from a risk factors from a small business perspective, again, 52% comes down to ethics and consent and autonomy, 47% over reliance, and 38% economic and employment impact. So different concerns for smaller businesses versus large. And I think we'll see that evolve over the next year or so in terms of I think the type of use cases that'll be adopted by smaller customers as they become more aware, and maybe really rather than building a solution, they'll be consuming AI as a service, which will help address a lot of these concerns for them.
Yeah, and I think that also smaller organizations tend not to have the legacy processes and some of the hoops you have to jump through, and so really having empowering medium-sized organizations to be more agile by simplifying or streamlining or automating a lot of those legacy processes. I think there's a huge benefit for Canada, because a lot of our organizations, even some of the ones that are on the bigger side, sort of fall into that sort of medium size, where they've got the complexity, but they just don't have enough people. Right. So I think that's a key to call out for sure.
Yeah, I think when we get into the different size of organizations and the ability for them to take advantage of things like AI, we have to look at whether it makes sense for you to build something or consume something. And as it becomes more complex and we deal a lot with these kinds of issues, the availability of new services, and there's all sorts of new services coming online, or existing services that are starting to essentially embed AI features as part of their tooling. Organizations of all size will be able to consume AI as a service and built in with the solutions they're already using, and won't have to necessarily go out and deal with the complexity of building their own. And I think that's really important. So I expect that through the as a service model, the smaller organizations will start seeing those benefits and be able to adopt fairly quickly.
Yep.
Whereas the medium and larger organizations will be really focused on not only doing that, but also investing in areas where they can create differentiation for their customers through building a customization of models, and probably the easiest way, which is via context and things like RAG. So
yeah. Okay, so we talked about some of the drivers. We talked about some of the some of the value and how we're going to measure some of the value. I want to talk a little bit about some of the barriers to success. So we talked about heaps of unorganized data in different places, and so that really becomes a limiter to how we can then leverage that data, right? And again, having risky data in there, so not having good data curation. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So a lot of what we're trying to do, Michael and I are talking about it, and if we think of sort of AI in three phases, we've got an ideation phase, we've got an operation phase, and we've got an innovation phase. We're in that ideation phase. We're trying to talk about, okay, well, let's relate to use cases that drive value. Let's really focus in on finding ways to explain things. Let's get rid of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt so that we can then focus in on the solutions. Not having clear use cases is a huge barrier because a lot of the drive to leverage AI is coming from an executive level or a C level within your organization. But again, you're not being given the starting point or even some of the goals and objectives. Just like, hey, we need to do something with AI, figure it out. And that becomes really challenging. Again, if you're part of IT and maybe you're a little bit separated from the business in some ways, from the day to day, that can become really, really challenging. And then not knowing where to start, right? And not having a good thanks, and not having a good point. So how do we make AI consumable? First of all, one of the ways that we're having conversations with customers about AI is, okay, well, let's talk about AI that we're going to focus on the coworker. We're going to focus on the individual. We're going to have the AI ready devices. We're going to have the tools that they put in their hand that make them individually more productive. We're going to have AI for the team. That's where we're talking about like RAG models, like have a subset of data. Let's create a targeted tool. Let's create a tool that helps our contracts team look at contracts and evaluate the terms and conditions faster. Let's find ways to do RFP creation faster. Let's find ways to generate that. Let's find ways to create a chatbot to help my users find information about the service desk and how they can self-service themselves with various types of IT tasks more efficiently. So what are the targeted tools that we're going to create? A little more narrow focus. They're going to drive productivity with the team. And then organizational AI. What are the organization-wide tools, more general purpose tools? What are the organizational tools I'm gonna put in front of my customers? And then the platforms. So we may do a lot of this build within the cloud, and then later on, as we build sort of a pipeline of development. So similar to the question that Jonathan had earlier about having all of these different subscriptions. Well, again, like what if we get to the point where we've got a bunch of different tools that are built in the cloud, and then we start to look at, well, the operational expense of operating that in the cloud is, $100, $200, $300,000 a year. Do I then start to look at repatriating some of those things into my data center and leveraging, capital expense, right? So I think breaking it up into where we're providing value for the individual, for a targeted team, for the organization at large, or am I looking at developing platforms to either train or do inferencing on and operate AI? That helps with the discussion, because now we're not talking about one giant big thing. We've got various partners that we work with in those spaces. From a data and then what are some of the other things we need to focus in on? So there's data governance. There's how do we go about making sure that we're curating our data, we're identifying risky data, we're removing risky data from the data sets, we're creating good mechanisms to bring new data in. So like let's not make the swamp swampier. Let's clean up the swamp, have that nice data lake, and then let's just populate good data into that as we go forward. And then cybersecurity. It's not just about having the data security. We also have models we have to protect. If we're doing build on premises or inferencing on premises, you have to create security for those containers. You have to have the ability to add new ways of securing the intellectual property you're creating. Maybe that's through things like digital signage and that. Platform management. Again, there's novel ways to manage the AI platforms, whether it's HPC, whether it was Slurm, whether it's AI and you're running PyTorch or you're running Kubernetes clusters. There are new tools that are available to help that. And then from a model management perspective, you're probably going to generate these tools, and then you're going to want to continue to update them. You're going to want to continue to evaluate, is my old model better than the new one I've created, and at what point do I sort of promote those into production? So there's different nuances to this and how we go about it. There's different partners that we work with. And then leading the AI charge, as we talked about, there's heaps of unorganized data. How do we deal with that? We have to curate the data. There's tools that are available. There's techniques that are available. There's processes that we can help, we can help you develop to help curate that data. The fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it's all about learning. Have an inquisitive mind, go into it and really start to figure out, okay, like what resonates with us, what types of models can we use, what types of parts of the business can we look to optimize, how would it practically help me? And that's just a good way of taking away that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, filling that void with knowledge, and then making some decisions on how to move forward in a simple way. Don't try to take your biggest, most complex challenge and do that first. You're going to really probably stall from the get-go. Start simple. Again, think about the three things it's really that generative AI is really good at. Summarizing data, classifying data, and generating from that data. And so start simple. Find something that individually takes you more time a week than you want to spend doing it. There's probably some tools out there that can help with that. And then if you're uncertain where to start, identify partners. Partners like CDW, we're doing a lot of webinars. Like I said, Michael and I are really focusing in on the ideation phase, workshops, readiness assessments, and then we're going to be launching some boot camps where we want to get hands-on. We want to help you, start building these yourself so that you can, again, demystify it, take these simple use cases and build them out. So there's that. And then CDW, we have a full life cycle of services, whether that's through the assessment phase and building those POVs and those POP workshops, architect and design, again, whether that's in the cloud, whether that's in your data center, implementation and all the services, all the security services that wrap around it. And then from a platform perspective, again, on the HPC side and the GPU side with NVIDIA, we help build those giant platforms. So we're here to help our customers. We're here to help go through that learning phase into your architecting, into implementing it, into supporting it as you go forward. And then I just want to say thank you. I had a couple of comments, questions. One of the questions was around the report. We will send the report out, so not a problem. It's a PDF. It's not a product pitch. It's really just information about the Canadian landscape. Really appreciate the team that helped put that together and do the survey. If you have any additional questions on that, feel free to reach out to your account manager or reach out through the CDW website. There's a couple of ways that you can get forwarded to somebody. Happy to engage, happy to talk to you. Let's make this meaningful. Let's find ways to do that. Let's see, so Justin H comment. The comment was AI seeming to enter the trial disillusionment phase of the hype cycle. Many of the startups are going to fail and get consolidated. I think we will see a lot of consolidation. If you look at the graphs and the charts that are out there, I don't think there's a reasonable way that landscape is as segmented as it is could survive.
I wouldn't say that acquisition is necessarily an indicator of failure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies getting acquired because they are doing something unique, and they're going to be more successful as part of a larger organization. So either way, I think ultimately we all win, and that's the important factor. Is there's so many solutions out there. Don't be afraid to get started, and let us help you understand what use cases are going to be most impactful to your business, and yeah, let's just get started.
Yeah, and I appreciate Julia. I appreciate you sharing that. I'll take a look. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of ethical considerations. Techno-feudalism is an interesting term. I think that goes along with my my Knights Charge slide, which is definitely techno-feudalism. And then as far as the presentation, yeah, we can PDF the presentation and send that out. We're also, like I said, we're doing a lot of webinars, we're doing a lot of training, and we will be doing some boot camps in the future. So, stay talking to your account managers. And like I said, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. There's all sorts of other places you could be, things you could be doing. Glad to see you guys join, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Have a good one.